Welcome back to That Rugby podcast, brought to you by the Sports Booth. You are joined by myself and Hughesy. How are we? How are we feeling?
I am feeling better today than I did last week. I obviously I'm feeling sad because I can't be there with you in person today. Such is the nature of work and things like that these days. Schedule just didn't work for it this week, but pleased with some of the results of the weekend, and we'll get into it later in the episode. But we're sort of doing a look back on the international season as a whole. And last week was about frustration. I think this week's about hope, about putting the season into context and seeing really what happened and looking forward to the future. So it was frustration last week, a new hope this week.
Yeah, I feel like what we're going to be doing later on this podcast is grading international rugby teams on their performance through the year. And I feel like I've never been one to want to be a school teacher, purely because I can just remember vividly the teacher-parent interviews and always getting told off, normally for talking too much about rugby during school time, and so it made me never want to be a teacher. But now we get our opportunity to be the teachers and give out a grade and grade some of the performances, I guess, of those international sides. A couple that we love and a couple that we may not love, and we may enjoy giving them low rankings. But first, obviously, 2 games of rugby union happened over the weekend. 2 international games of rugby union, I should say. 2 big games. Wales against what's left of the Australian squad.
Australia A at this point, really.
Like, you look at that squad and you could just about make an argument when the Australian A team was first named that there would have been a good handful in that Australian A side. Yep. So, I mean, 63-ish minutes or 57-ish minutes of, I wouldn't say disappointing rugby from the Wallabies, but definitely not clinical. And then all of a sudden
same
you
old
decided,
story type of thing.
Yeah, pulled the Houdini out of the hats, and absolutely killed it. I mean, a sensational comeback. It was very reminiscent of the comeback against the All Blacks that never eventuated. You know, you were down and out of that game by about 20 points and somehow pulled it out. I mean, I'm still kind of disbelief when I watch back and rewatch the game, just how quickly that game turned. But yeah, a lot of, I guess, a couple of superstars maybe in the making as well. You've got another good outside back there who we hyped up during the season, but he's taking his chances as they come.
Someone not named Corabetti, but with an somehow even more difficult to pronounce last name, Mark Nwangani-Tawase. I've got it now. It's lodged in the brain now. Of course, another Waratah. Where else would the superstars be coming from in Australian rugby? But yeah, Mark Nwangani-Tawase had a fantastic game. Again, two in a row. Consistency, I think, has been something we've been searching for in our outside backs, not named Corabetti. And I think we found one that can do it. Looking ahead to the Waratahs of next year, Dylan Peach on one wing, Marky Mark on the other. It's going to be dangerous combo for the Tars. But still focusing on the Wallabies now. Again, discipline was an issue. A lot of cheese during this game, and we weren't even in France this time. So it's just not a good look for the team. Jake Gordon, love the man, somehow always seems to find himself playing 10 minutes less than he should be by getting carded in these games. So something he needs to work on. Yeah, something the whole team needs to work on. That's where Wales were able to score a few points, is when we were down some men and things like that as well. But look, we got some calls that went our way for once this game as well, so that was good to see, and we capitalized on that. I feel like the halves combo for as in the halfbacks for the Australian World Cup team is really, for me, at this stage, is pretty solid as Nick White and Tate McDermott at this point, and Jake Gordon in there as the backup if someone gets injured. I think Tate had a good game, provided a lot of spark when he was on the field as well. Nick White, for me, though, has got the veteran leadership. So we see Nick White start, Tate McDermott come on late when we get to the World Cup. Ben Donaldson had a good game at 10 as well. with Noah Lolesio coming in towards the end of the game. And yeah, a lot of people, I saw a lot of commentary. It's like, that's a lot of disrespect to Noah Lolesio, what kind of message he's sending him. I think Dave Rennie summed it up really well at the end of the game, which was, we know what we've got in Noah now. We wanted to see what we could get out of Ben. And it's like, that's it. Like the fact that they then trusted Noah to come on as the 10 to finish out the game, I think shows that they have trust in him. And he did what he needed to do perfectly. So that 10 jersey, Rennie, I think, is pretty firmly established that Quade Cooper is his go-ahead 10 for the World Cup if he's back in time. And I think it's Noah Lolesio after that, and then maybe a Bernard Foley or a Ben Donaldson after that as well. But I think Quade Cooper's pretty clear-cut the 10.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because do you go down the road, and we again, Ghetto Law, it comes up every podcast, and I don't think it'll end anytime soon, but... Okay, let's say Karevi or Korobeti, obviously hoping for the best, but say one of them does go injured. Do you, it would be a bold statement to make from Rennie, but go, actually, I'm going to take 2 first fives, even though that one of them may not even see the field during the World Cup, but just select them in the squad and really send a message to, I guess, Rugby Australia to go, like, here's a handcuff, and you're doing a really good job of this because, I've got no problem with him having Quade. The way that Bernard Foley has stepped up, that 13-10 against the number one team in the world. I know they were missing Johnny Sexton, and he's a very important part of them. But against Ireland, he played, again, he manages the game really well. You saw it against the All Blacks. If you know what you're getting out of Noah Lolesio, it's not enough to beat the All Blacks. If you know what you're getting out of Bernard Foley, he's done it before. Like, it is, again, and that's not a knock on Noah. Noah is the first five of the future, but he's played those big games, like you said, like Dave said, like, we've seen what Noah can do. He's played big games, and that's probably the only thing I would take away. I'd be like, man, you look at like Noah Lolesio's test record, and it's not that it's a bad test record. It's he plays every good team. Like he hasn't, and again, he had his opportunity. I think it was against Italy. Did he start? And obviously didn't work out in his favour. Not completely his fault. But yeah, it is. Sometimes you want those games, but I think people were going way over the top with it. This is the time to be trying out everyone.
Yes.
We were winning a World Cup with Stephen Donald kicking us a penalty. You need to be able to know, okay, who is my fourth in line? Who is my fifth in line if it gets to that point?
Yeah, and I mean, we said at the top of the podcast, like, it's basically the Australia A team that was playing based on injuries. That was what, Dave Rennie just had to throw everything at the wall and see what sticks in that last game against Wales. I think we even said it ahead of the tour. It was like, if there's going to be a game that's got experimentation in it, it's going to be, if there's any games that are going to have experimentation in it, it's going to be Italy and Wales. And that's what we saw. And that was what was needed. Because that's the point of these tours, is to see what you've got in your players. Otherwise, how would we have found out about Marky Mark? So, look, it was necessary. It got us over the line as well in the last game. There's some chatter that the Ghetto law will be maybe not removed for the World Cup, but relaxed so that instead of only 3 players, it's 5 or something like that. I'd like to just see it scrapped for the World Cup, to be honest. Like, I think it's hard to say. I reckon you can make, if you don't want to completely get rid of the Ghetto law, I reckon you can do something like a stage system where for the World Cup there is no Ghetto law, right? Because you just need your best players. World Cup's the most important thing. Rugby Championship, instead of only 3 players for the Ghetto law, you have 5. For Autumn Test Series, you have the full Ghetto law of only 3 players. That way, people can stay and play Super Rugby, and they are encouraged, because they will get a shot in a Wallabies jersey when it comes around to spring tour time, or exhibition matches, or games where teams tour in Australia, like the England series and things like that. More restrictive Ghetto law there, so that those players do get a chance to play in the Wallabies jersey. But when it comes to the important things, Rugby Championship, World Cup, it's more relaxed, if not completely removed. So that way Australia can put the best team on the field, because, no one, like you said, the one hand behind the back analogy is perfect. How are we supposed to be winning these championships when our best players aren't able to play? It's ridiculous.
Yeah, totally agree. And I like that. I like that a lot. I think if you say to someone, you can choose the money, but you may only be able to wear the Wallaby jersey once every 4 years. It is a now, hey, do I want to stay at home? Do I want, like it does hold a bit more to it. I don't mind that. I think that could be a very good movement for the Wallabies
and it's
at least.
And it meets in the middle, and it sort of it addresses both concerns at the same time. But look, when it comes to the World Cup, having anything like the Ghetto Law, I think, is completely fucking stupid, because World Cup, you should have your best team on the field, no matter where they play their club rugby or their professional rugby at. Like, if they are able to represent Australia, they should be on the pitch.
100%. Totally agree. So, I mean, yeah, it's. I imagine eventually this will become a point of conversation for the All Blacks as well, somewhere down the line. But for now, New Zealand Rugby is making too much money to care. Shall we move on to the other game where England were, I guess, I don't want to say embarrassed, but they were booed off Twickenham. So, I mean, there'll be some embarrassment in that sheds. Tough outing.
I watching the highlights of the game. It was such a classic South Africa performance where it was just 3 points, build up the pressure on England. That forced mistakes because they thought they were getting behind on the scoreboard. That led to more South Africa points, et cetera, et cetera. I think England were probably unlucky in some of the calls that went against them. Not too much, though. South Africa just a great team. And that answer try was just an absolute classic. Like, he looked like I do on Sunday mornings playing touch footy, just stepping around everyone, scoring a try. Like, it's just incredible effort, He's been watching my highlights, that's for sure. It's just a great game from South Africa. Great game from South Africa. England will be disappointed in that one, especially because Fortress Twickenham these days is more like a tourist information booth, Twickenham, with the amount of people coming in there taking whatever they want.
Yeah, totally. I mean, couldn't have said it better myself. It's tough. It's tough because, the English are a proud nation, and again, don't get me wrong, I love seeing them lose. It's not a complaint, but realistically, they should be they lost to Argentina, should have lost to the All Blacks, lost to South Africa, and did they beat someone else in there? I think they beat someone else in there.
I've got so England this year they played versus Australia. They had a disappointing Six Nations, and then they played. God, who did they play? It was. Yeah, I'll get it here in a second. Japan,
yeah, and they beat Japan. One good performance realistically, and then a good 10 minutes against the All Blacks, and it's tough. I'm a believer of Eddie Jones. I am, but I can imagine there'll be some angry old white men complaining about the way that the current English squad is playing some footy.
Yep, I agree.
Saying that we do need to discuss investigations, and this may become part of the podcast, because there's obviously the famous Jeff Tuvey, there's going to be an investigation. And did you like that? And
it's like he's right here in the room.
And there's two investigations about to go down in the world of rugby, and you're probably all thinking, oh, no, it's not that serious. One's the Australian injury toll, which has become laughable so much that they've decided that they have to investigate it. And then we've got the English doing an investigation into their, I guess, current coach, just their whole rugby season because of how bad it was. And I mean, it could have been a lot worse if they'd lost the series against you guys. So, to start with the first one, which they should have. To start with the first one, obviously the Australian injury toll. This rightfully needs to be investigated. I don't know. There's some obviously injuries are a part of our sport, and contact injuries are. You can't do much with contact injuries. Man, I studied physical education. All right, people. I should know stuff like this. I know the human body. Like I'm all about that. However, contact injuries can't really stop that. It's the non-contact injuries that, especially from your team that you're seeing, that is a real issue. And I mean, a clear example Papua's Taniela Tupou, who, I mean, has played less minutes in a green and gold jumper than I'm sure everyone in Australia would like. And so I understand the need for an investigation. It should never have got to this point. Like something seriously gone wrong.
He spent more time in a Wallabies jersey serving tea to English old ladies in that stand than he has on the field. And it's not his fault. And I think we saw it as well when we were visiting Argentina, that there was a lot of injuries in practice and things like that as well in training. And, there was a real commitment this year by Dave Rennie, the coaching staff, to really sort of, it's going to sound bad, but they wanted to really physically punish the players to build up their endurance, build up their toughness and things like that as well. And conceptually, that's good, but you have to do that in a smart way, because we saw a lot of injuries there that probably could have been avoided because they were trying to make a point to the players or instill something in training. But I don't think there was enough attention paid to then the recovery from that, or really enough safety concerns. Like we saw, I just remember in the Argentina tour, we saw Dave Parecki knocked out in training. I think Hunter Paisami knocked out in the same training or the next training session as well. So that's going to be looked at. Probably a different strength and conditioning coach brought in, which would be good. I wouldn't mind seeing maybe a strength and conditioning coach that's worked in the NRL before, because they've got, actually in the NRL, you've got to have a lot of cardio fitness for that as well, because there's a lot of up and down in that game, running back to get back on side, et cetera, et cetera. So I wouldn't mind seeing some of that in there. And then they also have to deal with similar concerns about head injuries and things like that as well. So I think that is being investigated, and rightfully so. I don't think it'll, anyone will be hung, drawn, and quartered about it. But I think hopefully it'll reveal better processes to go into the World Cup year, so that we can avoid more of these training injuries and non-contact injuries, et cetera.
Yeah, no, totally. And I guess, I think they've already got rid of the strength and conditioning coach, which, obviously is, you don't want anyone losing their job, and you hope that person takes it as a learning curve. But it will be interesting to see who they bring in and how much of an emphasis they put on that, because there's now a lot of pressure riding on us. Like, this wasn't that big of a thing. Like, it was obviously a big thing. Oh, there's so many injuries, we need to. But now that you've kind of gone out and said, yes, we're going to launch a formal investigation into it, and we're going to investigate it, it does become now a big thing. It's like, okay, they're looking into these reasons why, what's this, they'll break it all down, and I'm sure they'll do a very good job. And going into a Rugby World Cup, it's the time you have to do it, because you can't be losing this many players going into a Rugby World Cup. But it now is a big thing, because if it happens again next year, your investigation has A, got no results, and B, been a waste of time. So there is now more pressure on A, the strength and conditioning coach who comes in here, and whatever regime that Rennie decides to run with going into the World Cup next year. So that's an interesting point. The next one, the English investigation. Now, this is such England rugby, and it blows my mind. You've got Eddie Jones, who's a known winner as a coach, who's won a Rugby World Cup before, like done it all, going into the next year Rugby World Cup, and you like all that chat about Dave Rennie and maybe losing his job and stuff, it was all just media chat. There was never anything said by Rugby Australia. For English rugby to sit there and go, we're going to investigate just everything.
Why the results weren't the way,
I'm
it's just ridiculous.
Oh my God, shoot yourself in the foot. Because again, like I just said with the Australians, this is just now pressure added, because you're investigated. If you don't get rid of him, and your results stay the same, everyone will like, what happened with the investigation? If you get rid of him and results don't change, everyone will be blowing up about that decision. Now, if you keep him and he does really well, everyone will be like, why were you investigating him in the first place? You look like an idiot. Like, just to me, it's a lose-lose-lose situation. There's no winning. Like, the only way they win is if they get rid of him, bring in someone, and they win a Rugby World Cup. And that isn't going to happen. Like, that cannot, there's no one on, maybe Warren Gatland. I don't see. Ronan O'Gara's been talked about. He's obviously a fantastic coach at the moment, but I don't see anyone in the coaching. Scott Robinson hasn't been proven at that level that you can sit there and go compare to Eddie Jones.
Yeah, 100%. Like, this is a man that took you to a World Cup final in the last World Cup. He went to Australia and had a winning series there. And you tied the All Blacks, but still, that's the All Blacks as well. I think there's a lot of context that needs to be made. I think overall, and we'll get into this more when we review the years. performance by everyone, but I think it's a disappointing year for England in what was they expected to be a big year for them heading into the World Cup. So they don't have that momentum going into the World Cup that they would have liked. What they've got now, though, if they could play it right, is a bit of an edge, is a bit of that everyone doubts us, no one's taken us seriously, under pressure, backs against the wall, let's fight it out from here. But yeah, honestly, it is disappointing from England, but I don't think it's necessarily Eddie Jones who's the problem.
No, and
much the same as like with the Wallabies, I wouldn't say that Dave Rennie is the problem there.
No, 100%. And I'm interested because like this, obviously this year matters, and like building to a World Cup is great, but you don't want to peak too early, like it's well known. Yeah. And then especially going into the next year, you know, Australians too winning rugby championships of 2011 and 2015. So like to go into a World Cup year, nothing else matters but that Rugby World Cup. Now, I look at England and I go, you've got the number 1 and 2 team in the world in your Six Nations competition, which is very rare when you're talking about England not being one of those top 2 teams and talking about 1 and 2 in the world, because that means South Africa and New Zealand and even Australia, chuck you guys in with those 2 other teams, they aren't 1 or 2. So they're literally playing at a level France had Japan on their tour, mid-year tour. South Africa had Wales. Now New Zealand and Ireland went to battle, and obviously that was the highlight of those mid-year tiers. But then England-Aussie was the second hardest. So it wasn't like their schedule hasn't been easy. Like their easy games they've won. The only real disappointment when you look at their schedule is you go that Argentina game. They win that Argentina game, and then I go, look, the way the world rugby is at the moment, top 4 teams, Ireland, France, South Africa, New Zealand. England's a clear 5th for me, like a clear 5th. Yep. They drew with the All Blacks. Look, they didn't play well against South Africa and got beaten by South Africa playing South Africa ball, and then lost to Ireland and France. Other than that, they're getting, like, if you think about it.
I think the main one that's probably sticking out to them, you're right, is the Argentina one, but the other one that'll be really sticking in their craw is the loss to Scotland. However, from what we've seen from Scotland this year, Scotland is not to be underestimated.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, totally. And I the way I still see it is on the day, I'm picking England over Scotland still at this moment. You know what I mean? Like, it would take something pretty special to change my mind on that they're not the 5th best team in the world. And if you're going into the World Cup and you go, yep, we're the 5th best team in the world, I believe they're on the easy side of the draw, where all the top 4 teams, if they win their pool, are going to fall on the other side of the draw. It's just mental England rugby from me.
They fall on Australia's side, I believe.
So the easy side of the draw. Yeah.
Well, until they meet us in the semi-final and lose, and we go to a World Cup final. So they are in Pool D with Japan, Argentina, Samoa, and Chile. And then, so say they win that pool, or they come second. But let's say we'll say that they win, and we'll give them the benefit of the doubt here. The Rugby World Cup site doesn't actually say, but I believe that the winner of D plays the runner-up of C, right? And then the winner of C plays the runner-up of D. So, and then they meet in the semi-final. So on Pool C is Wales, Australia, Fiji, Georgia, and Portugal. So Australia 1, Wales 2 there. So they play Wales in their quarterfinal match, and then they come up against Australia in the semi-final. So yeah, on the other side though, you've got South Africa, Ireland, Scotland, Tonga, Romania, and Pool B. Pool A is New Zealand, France, Italy, Uruguay, and Namibia. Quarterfinals there will be France versus Ireland, New Zealand versus South Africa, or some combination of that, which will be crazy games. That's that's your top 4 teams of the world really facing off there in the quarterfinals, and that semi-final will be a massive clash. So, going to be interesting.
Okay. So yeah, Pool A and Pool B are on the same side, and Pool C and Pool D are on the same side.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, like I just sit there and go, yeah, the top 4 teams are on the other side of the pool. Like, as long as you take care of your business and they take care of their business, what are you doing right now? You're shooting yourselves in the foot before it's even got there.
100%.
realistically, you've got the easiest run to a final that you're going to have in years if it all goes the way we're expecting it to go. I mean, even if it doesn't, it's like I don't know. England rugby has me scratching my head at the moment. As bad as the year has been, it hasn't been that bad, and what's ahead is far more important. My friend, it is your time to shine, though. Hughesy, start of the week. Who you got for us this week?
I mean, I don't think it's going to be a surprise to anyone here, but it's Mark Nwanganitawase. Mark, the amazing winger for the Wallabies, stepped up when needed to, scored tries and put points on the board when needed to. Great in defense as well. Not really that much to say other than that. It's all been covered pretty extensively. Mark Nwanganitawase, probably the winger that'll be across with Corabetti come World Cup time next year and things like that as well. Making Dave Rennie's job easier in team selection. It's hard to deny Mark Nwanganitawase a position in the Wallabies going forward. Yeah,
I mean, we talked about a pretty special player that we thought when Vunivalu being across from Corabetti that was going to work out, but it was actually going to be someone with a harder name, Marky Mark. So, I mean, he's a favourite of this show, I'd say. I'm a fan of Mark as well. I can't believe he's 22. He is still a young gun. If he can keep playing the way he has this season, a massive future. So excited to see him rip and tear at the Waratahs this year. So congratulations, Marky Mark, on winning Hughesy Star of the Week this week.
And one day Luke will get your name right.
I sit here
one day.
Every time I see it, I try and pronounce it and screw it up the first time, get it right the second time. So I'm not going to do it until I'm 100%. I've got it down, and when I've got it down, you will see me on this camera, and I will sit here and I will pronounce it to you.
You know what's the great mantra I heard from from a children's book that I used to read when I was a kid, which is don't practice until you get it right, practice until you don't get it wrong.
That's the one. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's nice. I like that. So I'm going to practice until I don't get it wrong.
Yeah.
That's a good one. What book was that? God, you were reading some deep children's books.
I should say young adults book. It's The Ranger's Apprentice by actually an Australian author, John Flanagan. So, good young adult fantasy series for those looking for books out there. Hughesy's Book Corner.
Hughesy's Book Corner. Yeah.
This has now become a lifestyle podcast.
I was sitting there thinking like a children's book, like pictures and this and that.
No, like a young adult book. I mean, look, I was a child when I read it, but I was an advanced reader, so.
I see. Yeah. I was held back a couple of years with my reading.
Yeah.
So that's as you could tell when Hughesy decided to message me late last night after I sent him the run sheet that I'd spoke.
I wasn't going to
investigate in 3 different ways.
I wasn't going to say anything. I was going to let you have that one, but
mate, believe me, I know I'm there. I'm a material speller, a material reader. English isn't my strong suit, but I host a podcast, so fuck you. Shall we grade some international footy, my friend?
Let's do. So I guess what we'll do is I'll say the team and their record. You give your grade, talk about your reasoning for that, and I'll do the same with mine. So we'll start, I guess, with the All Blacks. I don't think I'd be able to hold you back from talking about them. But the All Blacks this international season went 8-4-1. So 8 wins, 4 losses, 1 draw. And Luke, what grade did you give them?
I gave my All Blacks a B-. Now, I'm in an R and I was, fighting with myself if it was a C+ or did they creep into the Bs, but I decided they went B-. And the reason I decided that they creeped into the Bs was they actually, other than that England capitulation and obviously the Irish series loss, but they won the Bledisloe, they won the Rugby Championship. There were some results there that weren't All Black-like, but we were in the most competitive international rugby time of our lives. So I sat there and said, for everything the All Blacks went through, to come out with, twice as many wins as losses, 2 championships, in the trophy cabinet. The Irish loss still stings, obviously, but they're the number one team in the world for a reason. So that's why I went B-.
Yeah, I was a little bit more generous than you here. I went for a B. Because I think as well, this is, I guess, maybe the difference in standards that we were maybe applying to this. I sort of put this in the context of if any other team in the world could take that record, where would they sort of rate their year? And I think as well, historically for the All Blacks, an average season is an A, right? Yeah, average season is an A, maybe one loss or two in there, but otherwise pretty close to a clean sheet. So I think the All Blacks are sort of like me in school. You're used to getting an A, so a B is disappointing. And so that's why I've given them a B. So they won't be happy with a B, but I don't think it's as bad as a B-. Now, the losses this year, 2 of them to Ireland, 1 to South Africa, 1 to Argentina, right? And you also had the draw against England. I'll also put in there was a narrow victory gifted to you by he who shall not be named against the Wallabies. So that one will probably still be in the back of a lot of people's minds as well. That was a bit un-All Black like, where nearly giving away a double-digit lead to the Wallabies, which just doesn't happen. So that'll be in the back of people's minds. But I think overall it was definitely a below par year for the All Blacks. But I think in terms of how an international rugby team performs, it was a solid year. It was worthy of a B.
Yeah, I see where you're going there. I will let you start with the Wallabies one. So the Wallabies went 5-9 this year. Asterisks again, as you just said, 6 and 8, you could say.
Look, I mean, it's hard to grade the Wallabies, because we talked about earlier. So to be clear, I gave them a B-. I thought this year was disappointing for the Wallabies, but then I sort of looked at the context a bit more, right? Huge injury toll, and also loss of players for the spring tour, with Karevi going down, Corabetti not available, et cetera, Cooper down. Looking at our losses as well, particularly the spring tour, 1 point loss to France, 1 point loss to Italy, 3 point loss to Ireland, right? Most of the team injured as well for the tour. Giddo Law for the entire time, right? So Giddo Law, you're already playing with a huge amount of players unavailable. Then you have even more players unavailable because of injury, and you still managed to scrape out with very, very narrow losses to 2 of the best teams in the world. Like the fact that the Wallabies were able to match it with those teams with such a lack of experience in there. And in fact, a really interesting quote from Dave Rennie was brought up, which was in the Italy game, people asked him, why did you have Tom Wright at fullback instead of maybe putting Jock Campbell back there? And he said, well, really, when you look at the back line, there was no one really with any experience back there, and we needed someone who could actually have a voice and talk through what we needed to do in the back line. So he's got those concerns as well, because the back line is so thin on talent at the moment due to injuries and things like that he had to perhaps not play his optimal team, and they still came away from that with a win. And you have to think about how that affected their games against France and Ireland, things like that, where they're playing players that don't have a huge amount of experience, and they're still going blow for blow, toe to toe with all these teams. So for me, it's a mixture of frustration, but as well, there's a bit of hope in there as well. So I think you look at the start of the year, I think the Wallabies have improved, even if the results are not necessarily reflected that. I think they've definitely improved from where they were at the start of the Rugby Championship to now. Or I should say from the start of the England series to now.
English series to now, yeah. I wasn't too far off here. I went with a C+, for a lot of kind of the reasons you said. I just took them down to the C+ margin. And again, you can use, I don't want to say it's an excuse because it is, but it isn't. Like the injury toll and everything is an excuse, but it did it clearly, as you said, take an effect. I think the loss to Italy's probably the only one that stands out that dropped them from, I think they get there, I can put them in the B margins and stuff like that when you look at all the games. Say they beat Italy, they're now 6 and 8, you can put the asterisks and then go, 7 and 7 for the year with the All Blacks game. So that Italy loss was just the real driving point. I think they'll be disappointed with the series against England as well. They had that one to win and lost it. And the second game against South Africa, there was just moments where they could have pushed their grades up that they didn't take key moments. But yeah, there's enough there to not say that they failed the season and that it was a terrible season, but enough there where I was like, I still want to see more.
Yeah,
Argentina,
I agree. It's narrow though. Yeah, Argentina, 5-7 result this year. I graded them at a B. So for me, they had some spectacular results this year, but the biggest issue with them was their consistency. Every time they had a big performance, they never seemed to be able to back it up. They would always lose heavily the next two games. So the result against New Zealand, great result, smashed the next game by New Zealand. And then they had, I believe, a good game against, they won that game against England and they got smashed by Scotland the next game. So consistency, and it seems like, and it's a very Argentina thing, lots of passion. You put it all into one game and then they sort of take it easy the next game. And you can't have that at a World Cup, which is sort of what the curve I was grading them against here. So I think it was a fantastic year for them, but I think they will be disappointed that it wasn't better. I think this had a potential to be really a special season for Argentina rugby, and it's fallen short a little bit for me by those consistency issues.
Yeah, I totally understand that, but I completely disagree with you. I've gone with an A. I think you look at Argentina rugby, and they won a series against Scotland at home. They beat the All Blacks at the All Blacks. They beat England in England. I think they've turned a corner to a point now where they can go, we can beat anyone on our day. And not just can we beat anyone, we can beat the best of the best. And that's why I've gone with an A. I don't think, their overall record doesn't shine the greatest light to deserve an A maybe. But I just think in those games that I saw where they won those games, to say that they can do that, I think it's an A. I think they're building really well into a World Cup. So I went A for them, just purely based on those two massive wins, especially. I would have loved to see another win in South Africa. That would have really got them up to their A+, if they had been able to pull up a win there, because they beat Australia, they beat New Zealand. If they'd beaten South Africa one time, would have been an A+. Talking about South Africa, the 8-5 South Africans, I have gone straight out the bat, rate them a B. Now, they are very close to an A. France, Ireland game.
Yeah.
Both of those games, win those games. They're an 8. They will look back and there'll be no more disappointing loss than losing to New Zealand in South Africa in that second game when the All Blacks were on the ropes. That was terrible. And now that we've got to the end of this year and we see the team that Wales is, the fact that they lost to Wales at home and that series was so tight, that's what's dropped them down for me, because this end of year tour, as bad as 2 losses is, they've been fantastic, and I think they're so good. It's just they were really close to getting into the A bracket. I actually think they're the third best team in the world, and I'm an All Blacks fan, so that's putting them above the All Blacks. I know we beat them, and I know we won the Rugby Championship, but the way they're playing at the moment, I've got them as the third best team in the world. But I think they could have been better.
Yeah, I think we're both in agreement on this. Though you've given them a B, I've given them a B+, because they were for me as well close to an A. They had a controversial loss to France in France, a narrow loss to Ireland. They had one loss to Wales, a loss to New Zealand, a loss to Australia, right? So it's probably not I think, though, for me, what gave them a B+ was the win over England, the repeat of the World Cup final. And that you could sort of see that was the potential of South Africa fully on display there. So I think that for me pushed them up to a B+. But really, otherwise, I completely agree with everything you said for the Springboks.
Yeah. South Africa ball, when they play South Africa ball, we'll always say it, they are unbeatable. If you let them play South Africa ball, they will beat you. Okay, so that's the Rugby Championship teams done. We will now move north. Let's start with Ireland, number 1 team in the world, 9-2 record, 1 loss against New Zealand, 1 loss against France. How did you grade them, my friend?
I think we graded them the same here. I graded them as an A. Had a great season. Not really too much to say about them, right? Both of their losses were, and we discussed this last week with France and their record. A loss in France to France, France to France, however you want to say it, whatever fucking English you want to use, and then a loss to New Zealand in New Zealand as part of a tour where they went 2-1. So I think they've got to be pretty happy with that overall. I think maybe they'll be looking at the Australia game with a bit of concern about why it was so close. And this is what I think is probably I think we've talked about this a little bit, but I feel like Australia sometimes is getting underrated lately. I think Australia matches up very, very well against Northern Hemisphere teams, but not as well against the All Blacks and South Africa. Even then, South Africa this year we went 1-1. But I feel like Australia has just got something about them where they can look at these Northern Hemisphere teams and has some way of neutralizing a lot of what they want to do. So I think Ireland will be a little bit concerned by that going into next year. However, again, they probably won't be too concerned because they're on the opposite side of the bracket to Australia and not likely to see him. And won't see him until the final if they both get there. They're going to be very, very dangerous going into the World Cup, and I think all teams are going to be on high alert for Irish rugby.
Yeah, I went A as well, and the only thing stopping it being an A+ is they didn't win the Six Nations, obviously, losing to France there. The one loss to New Zealand doesn't even matter now because they won the series, but the loss to France, I know it was in France, that's why they don't drop any, but that's why they're not an A+, because if they'd taken home the Six Nations, easy A+. But yeah, they were definitely an A. Yeah, you can't point much wrong with the Irish team. On to that team, France. Now, we've gone slightly different rankings, and I'm going to start explaining mine first. I've gone A. I haven't given them an A+, and I'm going to tell you why. Strength of schedule. Now, this gets talked a lot about. You imagine I'm talking about like college football or something like that, and I'm part of the committee deciding who's making the top four because their strength of schedule, home game against Ireland, all of that end of series home games. I think it was home game against England when they beat England. So their mid-season test series was a 2-game test series against Japan. So I just sit there and I go, they won all their games, undefeated. You can't put them lower than an A, but they're not an A+ because, they beat South Africa controversially. As I was saying before my battery got as heated as I am about France not deserving an A+, they just didn't have a hard enough schedule in my books. So, my friend, why did you give them an A+?
Undefeated, 10-0 on the year. You can't do much better than that. Look, you can only play the teams that are put in front of you, right? France got in there and they did the job. That's what they were required to do. They fulfilled the brief. You can't really find many flaws with things when you go undefeated for a year, right? So that's my reasoning there. Anytime a team goes undefeated like that and they win some silverware for the Six Nations, what else do you say, right? There's nothing else that they could have done to have elevated themselves any further, right? That's what I look at it as. I was like, could they have achieved any better results? No. Could they have performed better in the games? Maybe. But at the end of the day, what's the most important statistic in rugby? It's a win or a loss, all right? Every game, 1-0. Did you win the game? Yes. Okay, great, success. They won each of their games. They did everything they needed to do in each of those games to win. That's it at the end of the day. Because when it comes to the Rugby World Cup, you still get the trophy, even if you only win the last game by 1 point, right? That's all that matters. So they got the wins. Tick. That's the most important thing in rugby, and that's why, for me, when I talk about the Wallabies, yes, there's positivity, but also there's negativity because as great as the Wallabies have grown, they're not getting the wins at the end of the day, and that's the most important thing. There's no trophy at the end of the World Cup for a team who looked really good but just couldn't quite get across the line. There's no trophy for that. The trophy is there for winning, and that's what France did this year. I can't fault them, so that's why they get an A+ for me.
Fair enough. Yes. Shall we move on to their English counterparts? Slightly different grades. I'll let you start.
Yeah, so England for me, even as much as we talked about them needing to stick with Eddie Jones, I gave them a D for this year. Now, big part of this was a very disappointing Six Nations. This was an England team that going into the Six Nations was very highly talked about this is their year to take it kind of thing. They lost to Argentina at home. They were honestly lucky to win the Wallaby series, and now they've also. And what's contributed to the grade for me is now this drama's around the coaching, right? And so English rugby has lowered their grade, right? If there was a bit more stability in there and just stay the course, Eddie's our coach through the World Cup. Yeah, things weren't as we wanted them, but it is what it is. We'll learn and improve. I'd probably elevate them a bit more. But the fact that they're internally disrupting themselves like this and they're shitting bricks over a 5-6-1 season is contributes to me to probably the what's I'm trying to think of the word here, the poor nature of the grade, because they've had some good wins this year. They've had some bad losses for sure. Not a great season, but then when you're throwing your coach under the bus, it just makes everything worse. And that's why I've the opposite of elevated them, I've lowered them down.
Yeah, and I get that. I mean, you've gone D, I've gone C minus, and the only reason in New Zealand, I don't know if it's the same here. Anything below, obviously, a C minus is considered a fail. So I don't think this season was a failure, but obviously it's no. You're not exceeding any expectations here, you know. Like if this is a job review, I'm like, you're lucky to be keeping your job, team, for the whole. English rugby union. So I went C minus. But everything you spoke about, like it wasn't great, Six Nations, but they showed enough promise for me in games that I was like, they won the Wallaby series. Like I know they probably lucky to, but still did it. So and in the end, like you said, most important thing is those win columns.
Yeah, for me, I guess like the D is like put on notice. Right, because that's what they have done. They've already said that they've put their coach on notice. We're doing a full review into it. There's performance management going on, so that's why I put them at D, because they've honestly done it to themselves by doing this review. So that's the reason for me to put them into the D, is because that sounded really bad, but that's why I've given them a D grade here. That's why I've given them the D, man, because they've put themselves under review. They recognize their performance wasn't good enough, and they're essentially saying you're on notice or you're losing your job. So, and that's what a D grade says to me.
Definitely. Scotland. Yeah. 5 and 7. I've gone with a C plus. Now, for a similar reason, I guess that I gave the England the C minus. It's a pass. It's obviously better than just your bog standard C minus or C, but it's not. They didn't push to a B for me. They lost to Australia at home. They lost to the All Blacks, even though they showed promise in that game at home. A big win against England. But if Scotland want to be one of those top 6 teams in the world, they have to be beating England and not being happy just by beating England. So I think the way I kind of saw the Scottish team was there was similar to what the English team had going into the Six Nations. They had a lot of chatter about this was like their season to topple some teams over. And, they went to Argentina, lost that series. They lost, to everyone just about in the summer series other than Fiji, and didn't look convincing in that game. So I just went, you know what? They pass. There was that win against England. There's enough good performances. But if they want to take that next step and go into the Bs and the As, they need to beat everyone.
Yeah, look, I'm very similar to you. I gave them a B minus for this one purely because they did beat England. And that always, for me, for Scotland, it just counts for that little bit extra. That is their Bledisloe Cup, really. That is their game of the year. That every year they go into it, it's like, our objective is to beat England this year. And so that was, they accomplished that. A 1 point loss to Australia and a narrow loss to New Zealand. They lost the Argentina series, but then they sort of redeemed themselves in my eyes by that absolute thrashing they gave them last week. So that for me elevated them a little bit into the B minus territory. I think they would be B minus to me says not too happy, but also like I got. It's like you sort of had an objective list for the year, and you got like 5 out of 10 of them done, right? So you feel like you got a lot ticked off, but you didn't quite hit all the marks that you wanted. So that for me was a B minus. It's just I see them similar to Argentina, who I gave a B to as well, where they want to be taking the next step and they're not quite there yet, but they still did some good things during the year.
Yeah, fair enough. The Welsh, my friend, similar grades. You go first.
Yeah. All right, so Wales, who went 3-9. Well, I gave him a D minus for this one, and I'll say, for me, an F is a complete failure of a year, which I don't think they had a complete failure of a year, because they did get some results going their way. They beat Scotland and they beat Argentina. But this year has got to be one of the worst years in Welsh history, almost as bad as 1277, where they were invaded by England. So it was very, very close in terms of terrible years in Welsh history. Look, a lot of their results as well, where they did lose, weren't by the biggest of margins. Particularly we look at the recent Wallabies game. But yeah, very, very disappointing overall. As I said, an F for me has to be a complete and utter failure of a year. I don't think this was a complete and utter failure of a year, but it was damn close to being one of those.
Yeah, I went one better and gave them the F. I couldn't see a year going any worse. Yeah, they beat South Africa. Yeah, they beat Argentina, but no impressive wins really in the Six Nations. To lose to Georgia, and then back it up with probably what was going to get them out of the F rating was a win against Australia, and to blow that, it just a capitulation, just an absolute miserable year for a proud rugby nation, which is sad. But yeah, this is what happens, and I can't not give them an F. I feel like if you said to a Welshman, oh, you're going to go 3-9 and these are your 3 wins, and you're going to lose to Georgia, and you're going to do this at the start of the year, they would have gone, you're fucking taking the piss, mate. Yeah, they would have strung you out. They would have chopped you up. They would have eaten you some lamb liver for breakfast. Those damn Welsh. What is it? Yeah, they love sheep. So that's
almost as much as you
like.
like.
I went with. Actually, probably more. I think. That's why the Welsh were given an F by me. Japan.
Yeah.
Finished the season 2-5.
I think we gave them the same grade here with a B minus. It's sort of a classic Japan rugby story. They showed a lot of promise. They showed that they're improving, but just not enough to get the wins. I think they'd still be relatively happy with the year, but I think they wish their record had been a bit better. Unfortunately, they had 3 games against France this year, which doesn't help, and as also a game against the All Blacks. But yeah, 2-5 for a fringe rugby nation that's sort of becoming more mainstream. It's sort of expected, but they'd hoped for more.
Yeah, 100%. Couldn't have said much more. Two B minuses, I think, are deserved. They'll be like, yeah, we'll take that year, but we missed out with the All Blacks. If they win that game, it's an A+. It doesn't matter. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. So that was Japan, and then Italy. I believe we shared the same grade as well. We both went A+ for the Italians. Again, I think I was debating an A or an A+ because of the loss to Georgia, but I just said that famous, the way they played and beat Samoa, and then to back it up against Australia, a top 10 nation, you can't say that wasn't a fantastic year. I think same thing if you're asking an Italian rugby fan at the start of the year, would you take this? They would have taken that head over heels. They would have loved it, absolutely gone, yep, thank you, we'll take that any day of the week.
Bellissimo. What a great year for Italian rugby. Historic wins. Their mid-year tour was against Portugal, Romania, and Georgia, and they beat Portugal, they beat Romania, and they lost to Georgia, which probably should have been our first indication of Georgia stepping it up this year. But yeah, a great year for Italian rugby, and they went 5-6 this year, so nearly a positive record as well. So I think they'd be very, very pleased with that, especially at a time when people were saying, let's look at getting another team into the Six Nations and kicking Italy out. They think they, put their foot down and shouted Italian slang out of their windows and defied the world's expectations, really, and just had a fantastic year.
Definitely answered some critics in a big way this year. the Italian rugby. But yeah, that is our grades for all the international teams for this year. Obviously, we didn't grade all of them like Samoa and stuff like that. But maybe we'll do a short little video if you like our grades so far and do the rest of the nations. Also, keep tuned on the Instagram, on our YouTube, on TikTok and everything. Going to be naming our top 100 players very soon. I've got the list kind of half ready, just doing some final spot checks with stats, so on and so forth. And then I send it over to my proofreader, power rankings guru, Hughesy. And
Make sure you spell everything right.
And he will probably move all the Australians up far too many places, and then we will release it to the world, and then we'll do some rugby awards for the whole year as well. So all that is coming very soon. Anything else from you, Hughesy?
No, that's it for me. I guess. Look, it was a great season of international rugby, and can't wait for next year.
Yeah, I mean, what a season to get us ready for a Rugby World Cup in 2023. So absolutely excited for that. But you can come back here next time and join us on that rugby podcast. We'll be back again next week. We do this year round, keeping you up to date with all the rugby union stuff in the world. For now, thank you for joining us. We will see you next week. Goodbye.
Peace.